Hey everybody, it's Rohan Dredge here. Welcome to 4Leaders TV. Really excited to have your company today with my friend and colleague Rebecca Christianson. We are going to talk about making millennial leaders. Can you believe that right now in the workforce, the oldest millennials are turning 40? I have friends that are turning 40 and they are at the head of the pack when it comes to millennial leaders and leadership, and they have significant careers and responsibilities already. But then at the other end, we're talking around the 20-year-old mark. And so we're talking about a large group of people that will make up a substantial amount of the workforce and the working population over the next 5 years. Beck's got some fantastic statistics and insights on that. Just before I bring Beck in, we are launching, my business partner, Mike Hardy and I, 4Leaders Global, our Leadership Accelerator. It is available to individuals and teams in a one-to-many approach. We do training and coaching online, virtually delivered. Applications are now open. It's a 6-session program, and it's designed to create leaders worth following so they can create culture worth reproducing. Let's bring Beck in and look forward to the conversation that we have with her. Hey, Beck, how you going?
Hey, I'm tracking really well, thanks. The sun is out. This is a good thing, right?
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. And just being mindful, both of us with our connections, being mindful of our friends in Melbourne, Australia at the moment, and acknowledging that that's a tough time for the city right now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I've got friends and family over there, and they're definitely doing it tough right now. So I hope the sun is shining over there for all those lovely Melbourneites as well that are listening.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's hope so. And I know that you've got friends globally, UK as well, and they're really interested in what you've got to say. But right from the very start, we have talked a lot about, and by we, I don't mean you and I mean the world in general and the people and culture and leadership pathways. We've talked a lot about the idea and the concept and the need to be ready for millennials. Help me and everybody listening understand, why do we still need to be making this a really important priority?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and I do get asked that quite a lot. So a lot of people aren't actually aware that millennials, so as you said, or Gen Ys, they're actually regarded as the same cohort. We've got two labels that are given to us. They're actually currently 30 to 40% of the workforce right now. And in the next 5 to 10 years, they'll make up between 70 to 75% of the workforce. So their voice is only getting louder and louder. And I'm seeing a lot of organizations kind of struggling to adapt to that change. And as you said, the millennials are quite a large cohort, aged between about 25 and 40. And so you've got people that are quite early in their careers that are just joining the workforce, and you've got others like me who are old. So I'm an old millennial. I just turned 40.
Congratulations. Well done.
Yeah, thank you.
So you're who I was talking about in the introduction, and I didn't even know, and I wasn't going to ask. So
yeah. So I call myself an old millennial, and also I kind of jokingly call myself a millennial whisperer. So you have like horse whisperers, and so I feel like I'm quite able to translate the two, between millennials and also help leaders in organizations really understand how best to capitalize on the strengths of this group of people, because we have so many strengths. I know I'm a little bit biased, but I think we have a lot to offer the organization. And I think the conversation in the past has been a little bit negative. So it's been focusing around some of the frustrations and why millennials might be really hard or have some challenging characteristics in the workplace. But I really want to revisit this conversation and change the focus about how they can add a lot of value and end up being assets to organizations. So I'm on a bit of a mission to do that at the moment, Rowan.
I love it. And I think it's an important crusade. Hence the conversation right out of the gate is, well, why does it matter? Why does it still matter? And we understand that that's the emerging workforce is coming. But with all significant demographic transitions, we've got to make those shifts. And I see it in I've got a couple of young kids, and I see how incredibly au fait they are with technology. They are true digital natives. They really understand everything about the way the world works. They've got no concept of television channels. They've just got ideas around television streams. And so, and quite frankly, because I'm their dad and a bit older, whether I think it's right or wrong actually doesn't matter. It just is. And that seems to come up a little bit along the way. And so you sit there right on that edge as I like Millennial Whisperer. I think we'll stay with that. And because your people and culture background has allowed you to influence people significantly older with a significantly more experience than you, but also take the organization into the future. So just unpack that a little bit about how you've done that as a people and culture expert.
Yeah, well, as you said, I've been a senior leader and exec in people and culture for quite a long time now. I've been in organisations where I've been the youngest and the youngest female to report to an executive. So when I was 30, so I've spent a long time, the last 10 years, working with people that are 10 to 15, 20 years older than me, and I've had some fabulous working relationships. And because I've worked in people and culture, you hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, right, about people issues. So you hear about everything that's going on in an organisation. And I found that I've had a lot of, senior leaders really struggle to understand how to engage and relate to their millennial workforce. And from my experience, I think the biggest barrier to engaging the millennial workforce and really capitalising on their strengths is not actually millennials themselves, like a lot of leaders would say, but it's actually the attitudes, as you alluded to, the attitudes towards millennials held by leaders. And let me prefix this by saying, there's a lot of fabulous leaders out there. So there's a lot of millennial leaders, and I've had some fabulous bosses who have been, much older than me and really been curious to understand what motivates and engages me. So, when I'm talking about leaders, I don't want to make sweeping judgments and assumptions, because we have some awesome leaders out there. But what I have found in the workplace is this a lot of negative commentary. And Ita Buttrose recently made some comments in the media. So she spoke at the UK Chamber and Commerce, and it was meant to be Chatham House rules, but someone broke those. And went to the media, but she made some criticisms around millennials, saying that they don't have resilience, they almost need hugging and need a lot of reassurance. And that's some of the rhetoric I've heard in the workplace. Other commentary I've heard from leaders might be, Rebecca, they just have such high expectations and they're so impatient. They're so vocal in the workplace. And, they've been in a role a year and they're talking to me now about what their next role might be. So I've heard a lot of that frustration, I guess, from other leaders in an organisation who have really struggled to understand this group of people.
I think it's fair to say from the outset of this conversation that we almost need to speak in generalities, but we're not necessarily pointing the finger at anybody around this. What we're actually looking for is some sort of practice that is codified because it's not useful, or codified because it needs to become useful. And so I think that's a really important part. And there are characteristics of successive generations. There were the builders, the boomers, the X's, and back in the day, I'll tell you, I was doing some labouring work at a builder's house, so a baby builder, so pre Second World War, and they had a backyard full of the clay roof tiles that they had kept for so long, it had overgrown over the top of the tiles. And I remember thinking as a Gen Xer, what a waste, And so this whole idea of successive generations and demographics, I think they just have characteristics we need to understand. So I'm a Gen Xer. I've got a work ethic that I got handed down to me by a baby boomer, and where might the more senior or veteran leaders be going wrong in the workplace right now with their attitudes? If I'm sitting here listening to this going, gosh, I've got all these new young people coming on board, what might I be doing that I don't even know about? Enlighten us.
Yeah, great. So I guess that links on to, there are definitely some myths or some consistent themes that I do hear, have heard leaders struggle with in the past. So, and I think with all of them, I think there's a challenge for us to flip that perspective on its head. So if we start with the first one, so millennials are renowned for having the what's in it for me attitude. So, always going back to themselves, being very self-confident and putting their needs first. And you alluded to each generation having had different experiences that really shape their attitudes. If you think about millennials, and I'll use myself as an example, before I even started work as a professional and when I was a grad, I'd already had both my parents being made redundant by two quite large organizations. And so, again, both had very, very high work ethic. And, you know, before I'd even started working in a professional job, I had seen that I could see that people were ended up being seen as being able to be cast aside, I guess, by organizations.
Expendable in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Same thing happened to my dad.
Yeah, and I saw that happen within a few years to my mum and my stepdad, and so that really shaped me. And I think we've got a lot of young people who've had the same thing happen, where they've seen their parents work really hard, and it doesn't mean that they don't want to work hard, but they end up thinking, well, actually, I want to put my needs first because actually no one else is going to, which actually is true. No one else will put your needs first apart from yourself. So I think this what's in it for me has come from what they've seen from their parents experienced, but also from their ambition. They have a great energy and drive to learn and to grow. And I think when that's capitalized, that can be fantastic. So if you're able to speak to your people in a way, your millennial people, and help them understand what's in it for them. So how working on this project or how changing their behavior can actually help them advance, then you're speaking their language, right? So I think part of it is the way we see their behaviour, but the other part of it is in the way that we communicate. So if we know how they think, then we can adapt the way we approach and influence them to really understand and pick out what's important to them.
Yeah, it's so important that aspect of actually understanding before we necessarily either judge or decide that it doesn't fit into the system, because the system's changing. As you were saying, by 2025, 75% of the workforce will be of the millennial demographic. What are we actually doing that gets us ready for that? And as the question I asked before, what are we doing that gets in the way of that? And so if you were, let's just say I put you in a mentoring group of 50 to 60-year-old leaders, and they said, we're a blank page, Beck. Tell us what we've got to look out for. Where might we be going unconsciously wrong, or what could our organisation need to be aware of or shift in order to embrace this emerging generation of leaders?
Sure. So I definitely start with expectations around work. So I think millennials have a very different expectation about what their work life means to them and how they want to operate in the workplace. So they tend to have a preference for having a really relaxed work environment. So, they don't want to wear suits. They kind of see that as a uniform. They don't want to be part of some of what I call corporate nonsense or the corporate facade, so that they want to work somewhere where they can bring their authentic self to work. Not the uniform, not the kind of work corporate phase, but they want to bring themselves. And there's so much research that actually tells us that when people do bring their authentic self to work, they're more likely to be challenging, to be more engaging, to bring better ideas to the table, which actually increases their productivity. So I think one of the challenges I would speak to that group is around helping them understand that millennials have different expectations of what a positive work environment looks like. And it's not just about foos tables and AstroTurf carpet. And I've worked for a business that had AstroTurf carpet and had a really, a very, very kind of cool, fun
M&M separated into colours and
yeah. Like I've been in an environment like that. So, I think helping them understand that just because their clothes are more casual, just because they seem more comfortable at work, it doesn't mean actually that they're not focused and that they can't be, they can't be energized. I think there's so much research now through Brené Brown, etc., who talks about bringing your authentic, vulnerable self to work, and that's been a real shift in a conversation for what we want from leaders. And so millennials have actually been demanding that of organisations for years now. They've been wanting a more authentic, genuine workplace where people are able to be themselves and they're able to collaborate in a way that's more authentic and genuine. And so whereas a lot of organisations have quite corporate, very corporate offices, and it's very stiff and formal, and that doesn't resonate with this group of people. But also, I don't think it necessarily always helps with productivity either. So I would challenge some of their thinking around what a workplace looks like. And building on that is also what work means to them too. So a lot of millennials.
Just before you answer that, what work means to them. So let's hold that idea. I want you to go back. I want you to go back to corporate nonsense, because I laughed at that, and I actually haven't heard you. I haven't actually heard you use that phrase before. So quick fire.
Yeah.
Corporate nonsense, what's it look like?
Corporate nonsense is, I have this image of when I lived in London. Corporate nonsense is getting off the Bank tube station. I did some work in the finance sector there. Corporate nonsense is walking down and seeing black swarm of people walking out of the tube station, walking to the office. It's everyone literally wearing a black suit.
A uniform.
Absolutely, a uniform to work, where there's no differentiation around individuality. We're just all the same. We're all soldiers marching along. We're all sheep. For me, that really resonates. And in fact, after I worked, I loved working in the finance sector. Don't get me wrong, but after that, I actually never wore a suit again. And I made a conscious decision that I wanted to bring my authentic self to work through and show some of my personality, through some of what I wear. So part of it ends up in what we wear. Part of it is also just how we behave in meetings. That real formal, very respectful, but very hierarchical behaviours where you don't challenge your boss and you don't ask challenging questions in broader team meetings because you don't want to seem like you're being cheeky or trying to show someone up. But what it leads to is actually groupthink. So when people are not actually able to authentically challenge, if they don't feel psychologically safe, then you don't get that richness of ideas. So for me, part of corporate nonsense is actually lack of productivity and a kind of a lack of ideas at times as well, because people are not necessarily encouraged to challenge and to raise concerns and to share learnings. And I think that's a really important part of driving innovation.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I really appreciate about your thought leadership around this space is you're talking about making a pivot or making a shift on the characteristics of this demographic. So we can vilify them and say, well, you speak up, which means you're not respectful, or you want flexible workplaces, which means you're lazy, or you lean into vulnerability, an idea whose time has come. But really, that means you need a hug all the time. And you're actually saying, whoa, wait up. What we should be doing is understanding the characteristics of this demographic and then leaning into those and leveraging them for the benefit of the individual and the benefit of the organization and its mission. And you were talking about meaning and purpose around that before I jumped in around corporate nonsense. And so this whole idea of purpose and meaning, what does that look like for a millennial emerging in the context of corporate life, because corporate life's got a fair bit of structure. It's got fairly high expectations and work ethics and things like that. How have you seen that play out?
Yeah, sure. So I see it play out first of all, when millennials are actually shopping for an employer. And I don't use the term shopping lightly, that they actually have criteria and they're actually, it's not just about the job, but they really want to work for an organization that they feel like is socially conscious. So one of the strengths of millennials is that they are, very, very aware of environmental issues, of people issues. So they have a lot of great respect for diversity and inclusion, and they really want that in an organisation. And so when they're first if they're looking to shift jobs, then that's one thing that they look for in an organisation, is making sure that the employer, cares, that they have a social conscience, that they give back to the community, that they have a really clear and meaningful purpose. So I think first of all, it comes to the type of organisation they want to work for. And then I think it comes in the type of work they do. So they do want meaningful work. And part of that is challenging meaningful work. So, they don't want to be given some, kind of small fry. And again, this is one of the criticisms they might get, is that they want high level work, even though they might be, younger or early in their career, but they want to know that their work is making a difference and it's able to help shift organizational culture or help improve customer service or create better products. So they really want to see that line of sight from what they do to what the organization does, and both need to be in parallel, and they both need to be really values focused. So one of the criticisms we get is around being too values focused or too idealistic, around the world, about the world. And yet, if we think about some of the corporate issues that we've even seen in Australia in the last few weeks, so when we've seen AMP who had some challenges. They promoted a person who had been known for sexually harassing female employees, and he got made CE, and he's just recently resigned. We've got another organisation. Yeah, so we've got another organisation who accidentally blew up some Indigenous sites and caves recently, and from a values perspective, I mean, I'm outraged by hearing about these things. But we do have some organisations, and they're not all big corporates, but we do have organisations who've lost their way a little bit. And so I think that this group of people, millennials, they do bring a values-based mindset. And I really think that this can help shift organisations to be more socially conscious, because it's what the community expects now. They have higher expectations of organisations these days.
And one of the things that I think that you're contributing to this space is you're saying, okay, so higher expectations, values-based, deeper awareness and sensitivity to mental health, inbuilt diversity and inclusion. And I say inbuilt because my summary view, or my generalist view of X's and boomers, is that has had to have become a learned skill in the workplace. And so, again, let's talk about transition, an organisation that's saying, hey, look, we think we're doing okay. We're giving ourselves a 4, 5 or 6 out of 10. And I want to talk to somebody who's really good at this to help us actually not just get through the transition to 2025, but to actually thrive and be ready. So from an organizational perspective, what sort of things should we be considering, doing and looking out for to more fully engage our current millennial workforce, but actually be ready to embrace the increased numbers that's coming through?
Yeah. So the first thing I think is to be able to really embrace the employee experience. And so essentially employee experience is stealing a lot of the great principles from customer experience. And so when you think about great customer experience, you would usually segment your customers, you would understand their needs and their behaviors, and then you would design bespoke solutions or products or services that would meet their needs. And organizations are very customer focused now. And if you take those principles and you can totally translate them to the workforce. So from an employee experience perspective, then you need to start segmenting your workforce and understanding truly what their needs and drivers are, not just what HR thinks they need or not just what leaders think they need, but actually asking them and then being able to basically make their job as easy as possible. And it's being able to design bespoke people solutions to meet their needs. And every organisation is a little bit different, but it's having a really strong, what I call people listening strategy. And it's usually not always through, it's usually not just through employee engagement surveys. I feel like employee engagement surveys have really got a little bit lost in the last few years because they ask too many questions, overwhelm, you get too much data, and leaders just don't know what to do with it. And then you have employees who are really frustrated because they feel like they're not listening. I'm telling you what I want, but you're not doing anything. So I think an employee listening strategy needs to be a lot simpler, and we're seeing that shift in it, moving away from engagement and moving to employee experience. So I think shifting that mindset around how we focus on what we focus on in the workplace, allowing it actually to come from what employees want. And that sounds really simple, but for some leaders, it can be really challenging. For some organizations, it can be challenging.
So as we keep unpacking some of these things that organizations can do, I want to jump in and unpack in a bit more detail some of the things that you're saying. So a friend of mine once said that he just is written down saying, generation, the millennials or Gen Ys, they don't work for you, they work for themselves. And that's a little bit about what I'm picking up. And again, you're saying, okay, so if that's largely true, how do we leverage that as an organization? Yes. How do we actually make that part of our culture moving forward? And so again, that's what I heard you say with all of that as well. And then this idea of sort of being demanding or having high expectations or wanting more, we turn those things into our advantage and turn those things into listening groups and not overcomplicating things and wanting that the lower levels of hierarchy and connection. Because it's interesting. I agree with you. I think we obviously work in our leadership training with lots of HR and people and culture organizations, and what we're looking to do is shorten the line towards the initiative and the transformation. And so we're not getting lost in bureaucracy and red tape and various things like that, because I think you'd really quickly lose your employees and their commitment to you if they told you 1, 2, 3 years in a row in an engagement survey, but it got lost in bureaucracy or red tape or anything like that. And so does any of that resonate? Is that all sort of making sense with your experience? Yeah,
absolutely. So pulse surveys have become a lot more popular, where they might, take place every month or every quarter. There might be 5 or 10 questions that are asked. Other organisations are moving to employee net promoter scores. So again, they're translating some of the principles from employee experience. So usually companies would ask you if you'll promote this business to, to a friend or family. Well, you're translating that then to the workforce. Would you promote this organisation, to someone that you know? So there are different metrics that are being used, and it's all around simplification. It's keeping it really simple, so anyone can understand the themes, and then being really practical about the solutions. And it's having both whole of organisational priorities, but also team priorities too. So because when you have team priorities, it's easier for the leader to implement those at a local level rather than waiting for whole of organisational changes or initiatives sometimes. So I guess it's leaders, and a lot of leaders are doing that already, right? They're really good at listening. They're curious, they ask questions. And I think this whole switch of mindset all needs to be based on curiosity. It's a fascination to understand them better rather than replacing the frustration of difference. And frustration of difference doesn't just take place, with millennials. It's with lots of things in life, isn't it, right? We sometimes get frustrated by things that are not like us, or people that don't see the world like us. And why can't they be more like us, Ru?
I know. I'm saying that less and less. I've got to walk around with my curious hat on. There's no doubt about that. You said something before that I wanted to hear more about. You said we need to be. I really love that shift around customer experience and employee experience. I think that's a great shift for the workplace. And so still under this transition banner, but you said to be really sensitive or understanding or listening to what our employees want. I really would love to hear your comments around how do we manage the mission of the organization and what an employee wants and bringing them together, and then perhaps even putting the arms of team around that experience as well. How does that get held in tension by organizations in this transition?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really great question. And I think that just because you ask people what they want and need, it doesn't mean you give them everything that they want or need, but you help prioritize where there's a great match between the two, where there's a good match between what employees or the team needs and how that does align with the business as well. So I do think there's a level of, I don't think compromise is the right term, but this is almost a level of kind of matching the two together, because one does need to be practical about it. But I guess also it depends if there's a disconnect, what that disconnect is about. Because if that disconnect is around millennials wanting to use more technology to automate, to drive change and innovation, well, these are all aspects that are required for the new world of work. So if organisations want to be successful in the new world of work, then they do need those skills. So they do need those aspects. So I guess it depends. I guess it's a bit grey, but it depends where the mismatch is. And if the mismatch is in any of those areas, then I think organisations need to be more open to be listening to what millennials are suggesting and thinking. And you've got organisations that have shadow boards now, that are comprised of millennials, because they realise this voice is being lost. And so, yeah, but again, it's on certain areas that we know that millennials are strong at, that they can really add business value.
I'd love to hear some examples. I love the shadow boards idea is brilliant. I was running an organization. I used a metaphor where I said there are 3 kinds of people in this space. So there are people that get to stand in the room, sit at the table, or be by my side. Yeah. And that was essentially 3 levels of influence, but it was also deepening the bench. It was also about saying, if you're standing in the room, you observe. If you're sitting at the table, you're in conversation. If you're by my side, you're actually a key person of influence. And so you use the example of shadow boards. Organizations that are at the front end of embracing, engaging, and creating thriving workplaces for millennials, or making millennial leaders, as we've called this particular show. What are they doing? What are the examples that you're seeing, and how are you helping with your consulting work and your thought leadership in this space? And what would you take an organization through and help them understand?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, again, depends on what some of the business challenges are, because each individual organization will have unique business challenges. But what I've done in the past when I've been in an in-house role is we've had executives who've been grappling with business challenges. And so we've got together a group of millennials to help try and work with an executive to solve a business problem. So it might be over a period of a week. We've taken people out for 2 days, 3 days, or 5 days to work through a current live business challenge and to provide their perspective on it. So you kind of fast track that understanding of the issue and then hearing their insight in quite short periods of time. So that's worked really well. I've done it over longer periods of time with organisations too, where, again, you kind of have this thought leaders group, which is comprised of millennials across the organisation, across different functional areas that are a project team that are coming together to advise maybe a certain function on a particular new initiative. It might be around product design or understanding the customer base better. But it's actually getting them involved in current real business issues that they're able to touch and get their hands wrapped around and provide their insight. And it relies on, whether it's executives or leaders being really interested and curious and respecting, the value and the contributions that they're adding. So that's one quite practical way of being able to give them something real to do, because they love meaningful work. They don't want to be given some organisations might do high potential leadership programs and they might give them kind of a pretend project to work on as a team or something. They want something real and meaningful that they can contribute to.
And that comes through in your writing and your thought leadership. The whole idea of like practice isn't okay, but that changes the way that they're led. It changes the way that they're mentored. It changes what we think about failure and experimentation and all things that go with it. And I think there's some of the challenge for the X's and the boomers, because failure is not an option. We leave no man, person behind, all these other things that we do. And millennials are going, of course I'm going to fail. I failed school, but I'm still here, and or I didn't fail school, but I failed a subject at uni, or it's a really different perspective, isn't it? And so I think that sense of, if you're thinking transition, people listening to this, it's got to be real, it's got to be meaningful, and it's got to be okay to make mistakes along the way. And I think
absolutely. Really, and I think there's also, in the last point I'd add is that it's okay, like you need to expect them to have different views to you. So it needs to be okay to have diversity of thought. And we know that groupthink is the greatest barrier to organisational productivity and success. When you've got people who are thinking in the same way, because they're all come from similar backgrounds and similar experiences, and so respecting and seeing the value of diversity of thought is a really important part of engaging this group, and also about being able to help organisations evolve more broadly. Super important.
So let's talk to millennials themselves. Like, as I said, the oldest are turning 40, and I've got a few of those, and you're one of those, a millennial whisperer. I work with some people, and they call me the leadership whisperer, which I'll take. I'll take it.
Yeah, totally.
I've got that. This is what's going on, and my spidey senses they're telling me what's going on, and then they're 20 at the sort of younger end, and of coming through. So let's talk to millennials themselves. If, again, you had a group of millennials, you were mentoring them, or there was a developmental experience that they were going on and it was meaningful and valuable and flat, fast and free and all the various things that we talk about. If we were to really stretch millennials that were listening to this conversation, how would we lean in and say, hey, this is what we need you to be aware of. These are these are the spots that you'll grow into, or they could be a blind spot, be aware of this? What would you say?
Yeah, I'd say there are 4 main areas that I would give some advice. And when I design leadership programs or do coaching, with millennials as I do, then these are some of the areas I always focus on, because I do think they can be barriers. Because as I said, millennials are not perfect. They have their own development areas too, just like all of us, because none of us are perfect, right? We're all on our own leadership journey. So the first one I would say that's really important is to not undervalue your own emotional intelligence, and that is around knowing yourself really well. And from you and I, through our work experience, we start to see themes in the feedback that people give us over the years. We get to know ourselves well, and Daniel Goleman talks about EQ, or social intelligence, now, and there are 2 important parts. So one is the intra, which is knowing kind of yourself inside. So it's knowing your strengths, your development areas, how you manage your own emotions, how you manage your frustration. I think frustration is usually one of the emotions that I see millennials exhibit a lot, because they get really frustrated at other people who are not able to move at pace like they do, or don't see the possibilities that they do. So I think the intra part's really important, and the inter, which is how you interact with others. So it's really understanding your impact on others. And to be able to do that, you really need to slow down conversations. You need to be able to work and influence better with people. You actually need to listen and understand what's important to them. And so millennials can make judgments as well about the people that they work with, just like the people that they work with make judgments about them too. So I think, EQ is really important, and millennials are in senior leadership roles much younger compared to their Gen X and baby boomers counterparts. And so they want to fast track their leadership development, but sometimes I think they bypass EQ. And I think that's a really important part. It's a building block to everything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it comes with experience. Part of it comes with intentionality. Yeah. Part of it comes with somebody who's further down the track. And one of the characteristics of millennials is they appreciate the mentoring or coaching style of leadership. Yeah. And so taking that sense of care and consideration becomes really important. We can actually say, hey, this is how you might have responded to it at this point in time, but let's work towards this, and those sorts of things that go with it. So what else would you lean in and challenge emerging, challenge yourself? You absolutely. Millennial whisperer, that's
The second one is around their influencing skills, which I alluded to, and it does relate to EQ as well. So I said it's slowing down the conversation. It's being patient to understand other people, that they're different and they might take longer to take on the journey of change. The third one is around organizational savvy. And so it's fantastic that we are so values focused and we have our ideals, but I think it's being able to balance understanding that there's a bigger picture that we don't always know about. And sometimes I see some millennials kind of fighting an organization. They might fight a decision that's being made that they don't agree with, and they're continually voicing their disagreement or dissent. And again, I think that the thought that they bring, that diverse thought, is really valuable. But if you can see that the organisation is shifting and not going to go in the way that you believe, and if you think there's a gap, then instead of fighting the organisation, focus on being a part of the solution. And so that is trying to mitigate some of the risks or the gaps that you're seeing, that you're disagreeing with. The kind of the stop fighting and being part of the solution sometimes.
Yeah, I use the phrase when I take people through this, like, we don't fight with each other, we fight for each other.
Yes.
And I think that could be a useful frame of reference there. That's actually good advice for all the generations in the workforce, isn't it? Like, we could be combative, or we could be consultative. That's the way forward. What was the fourth one?
And the fourth one is around valuing role consolidation. So I myself, that's around when you're in a new position, then there's a learning curve, right? And that learning curve can be really steep. Usually in the first 9 to 12 months, that learning curve is, you're kind of half stressed, but you're learning, and you're, really understanding your role and the value you can add. And there's this kind of, they kind of build off this kind of stress learning zone. But when you get to around 9 to 12 months, the learning plateaus. So you kind of go from here and then it goes to here. And that's when they tend to, and I've myself felt like that at times too, around the 12-month mark is when you tend to get a little bit bored and you think, well, I've kind of nailed this role, and you start thinking about the next role. But actually what I think is important, and I've done this a lot of my work in the past, is helping them understand the value of role consolidation. And so once you're nailing the role and that learning curve has plateaued, you can actually offer coaching and mentoring to other people in your team. You can get involved in other cross-functional projects, which can increase your breadth and understanding. So it's being able just to see the value that you can get in staying in a role, for a slightly longer period of time. And you can build those really good foundational management and leadership skills. If you're not a leader and manager, you can coach other people in your team, you can mentor them, and that puts you in good stead for then when you want to be a future manager or leader too. So I guess it's just trying to pace yourself a little bit at times rather than kind of wanting to run off to the next role. But again, I can relate because I have felt like that at times, and I've been headhunted in the past at certain points at an 18-month or 2-year mark, and I've just thought, no, I know I've contributed a lot. How much more learning can I get? And then I take the next opportunity. So I really understand that, and I've done it myself. So there's a balance somewhere, I think, in that role consolidation piece.
But it's a really smart reframe, and I loved your writing about that, because what it does is that you can perhaps even misunderstand the 12 to 18 month mark. So sure there's a plateau in learning and development, but if we then say, oh, it's because I'm not being given opportunities, or it's because the company doesn't value advancement, or it's because of any number of things. Or you're Gen X or Boomer and you're saying it's because they move around too much and they're flitty, or they're this or they're that. Yeah. And then we end up back where we started this conversation, which is what problems have we got? But if you see it as role consolidation, that changes everything. What do I learn while I'm here? Who can I reach out to? Where are the mentors? Where are the people? Yeah. I started life as a high school teacher, and there was a poster at the school that I taught at, and it said, "It's amazing what you learn when you teach."
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Right? So I'm 18 months into my role. Why wouldn't I spend some time with the new staff? Why wouldn't I spend some time with them? That's so fantastic. So Beck, tell us a little bit about, as we land this conversation. Thank you so much. Just really respect your work and your writing and your thought leadership in this space. What sort of work do you do with organisations, and where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. So the organisation I've set up is Thriving People. So for me, it's about helping organisations, leaders thrive. So I do work around executive coaching. I've got a range of coaching clients. I do have a lot of millennials that I'm coaching currently, but I do coach kind of a broader range of people. I said I've been an executive myself. So I've been there. I've been in senior leadership roles. I've worked for multinationals. It's a tough gig. So I think I bring a lot of value in the exec coaching space, but also do a lot of people and culture consulting work too. So I'm working with organisations to design and deliver leadership development programs for millennials. But again, I do that more broadly too. And I also have a big focus around helping reset people teams. So I've been a P&C exec in the past. So I'm really good at helping HR transformation and really helping them shift from the old paradigm of work to the new paradigm of work, which is focusing on the employee experience. And I do some other stuff too, but it's all good. It keeps me out of mischief.
That does sound pretty comprehensive. If people want to find you, LinkedIn, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Yeah. So people can contact me through LinkedIn, or my website is thrivingpeople.com. Yeah, well, I would love to hear from you, and it's been a pleasure as always to have a chat, Ro. So yeah, thank you so much for your time.
It's so good. I really appreciate it. I'm just really grateful for your time, Rebecca. And it's just been great to catch up over these last several months, and respect your time in the corporate role and also now in your own thought leadership practice, which is really exciting. So it's just wonderful to have Rebecca on the show. I've got a really exciting guest in a couple of weeks' time, Glenn James from Sort Your Money Out, because I wanted to keep the millennial.
Yeah, I saw that.
He's been a friend of mine for 15 years, and I just wanted to keep the millennial theme going. So he's the host of the podcast My Millennial Money, and I did a show with him, recorded a show with him last week. If the Leadership Accelerator is of interest, get in contact with us. It's an individual program that people can join, but also, and perhaps even more specifically, we're looking to invite people to take their teams through this. And we want to help you become a leader worth following so you can create culture worth reproducing. You can get in touch with me at rohan@rohandredge.com. Thank Rebecca Christianson. Thank you so much. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time, everybody. Thank you.
Awesome. Take care, everyone. Thanks again. Cheers.